Hello everyone. My name is Alana Jordan, and I'm a first year here at Princeton University, and I'm part of the university's Civic Leadership Council. I'm very honored to have the opportunity today to kick off this career panel. Joining me today as moderators are Tiana Rudin and Julia Lynn. Tiana, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then Julia can follow.
Hello, I'm Tiana. Thank you again for taking the time to interview with us today.
Hi, I'm Julia, and thank you once again for being with us here today.
So now we'll get into introducing our phenomenal panelists for today that have taken the time to be with us.
So I can go first. So today we have Mr. James Mays joining us, Princeton class of 1974. He earned his master's degree at Ohio State University and his doctorate in jurisprudence from the University of Baltimore School of Law. During his career, he engaged in private practice of law, worked as a correctional administrator, worked in research and public policy in Washington, D.C., and taught at the Department of Political Science and the Criminal Justice at North Carolina A&T State University. He also has more than 26 years of distinguished service at the United States Department of State's Educational and Cultural Exchange programs. And as an attorney, he has been the lead counsel for both state and federal cases. Mr. Mays has received several awards and recognitions for his professional work in community service throughout his career. We are so happy that he could be with us today.
Thank you.
We also have the privilege of being joined by Ms. Soha Aslam. She graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in physics with a minor in nuclear engineering from the University of Texas at Arlington, and she received her Master's of Engineering from Princeton in May 2020. She is currently a senior radiation effects engineer at Honeywell, working to make our satellites and space vehicles safer from radiation damage in space. She also serves on the board of a 501c3 nonprofit organization, Princeton FinTech and Quant Trading Conference. Her research interests include developing safeguards to prevent the spread of nuclear material, preventing nuclear crises by creating novel inspection technologies, and studying artificial intelligence and its impacts on nuclear strategic stability.
Thank you, Julia.
Awesome. So now we'll jump right into our questions for today's panel. So to begin, we would love to know how each one of you became interested in either your major here at what you majored in here at Princeton, or the career fields you ended up entering. So Soha, if you would like to take the floor first, and then James, you can follow.
Yeah, I studied physics, and I didn't know what physics was until much later, like in high school. But ever since I was a little kid, my parents named me Soha, which means star. And they would take us stargazing like once or twice a month. And I was just overwhelmed by the beauty and the vastness of the universe. And I think I knew at a very early age that I wanted to study the stars in some form or fashion. And it wasn't until like later in high school and early college that I realized that, physics is that field. And so I pursued it, and here I am like 10 years later, still pursuing it. Yeah.
Great. I came to law late. When I enrolled at Princeton, my intention was to study architecture. I really loved math, and I love drawing, and so I had the good fortune of knowing some architects who practiced in New York. I'm a native New Yorker, and that was my intention. So how did I get to law? Well, I didn't go to law school till I was 38 years old. And people said, why? Why would you do that now? Well, I came of age in a time where there was a lot of social and political activity. Some people refer to it as upheaval. I'm not sure. Well, there was some, disruptions, but I have always maintained an interest in social systems, people's rights and opportunities. And so by the time I started thinking about the law, it was as a result of one, being in Washington, D.C. People kept telling me, if you were a lawyer, you would really understand how this town works. So I became a lawyer, and I still don't understand how it works, but it has helped.
That's great. And James, you said you had little interest in like studying the legal profession as an undergrad. Your first passion was architecture. I was wondering
Yes.
what academic or extracurricular experiences would you recommend to a student seeking out like a career in law, and like what traits or skills should a student develop to help them be successful in that industry?
Well, I've met a lot of people who have said people go into law because they really can't do anything else, and that's not true. I've met many brilliant and talented people who have studied other disciplines, and it's reflected in the legal profession today. But I would say that you should always seek out academic rigor. I can speak about the law as being at least attending law school, it was described to me this way. So I hope I don't offend anybody by repeating it, but they said that law school is a jealous mistress, or I could say jealous suitor, and it demands all your time. So you need to be accustomed to academic rigor, but you also need to understand people, and so you need to have a good ability to engage people, because people are all over the map, and the law is all over the map. It touches every aspect of our professional and personal lives.
Thank you for sharing your
Thank
helpful
you. Yeah.
Okay.
Shifting back to you, Soha, we were hoping you could speak to your undergraduate experience as a recent graduate of Princeton. Did you know what you wanted to study or focus on specifically and academically coming into college, or did you shift focus slightly along the way based on your experiences?
Yeah. I'm a really big believer in just like finishing things from start to finish. I have a little bit of an OCD, like if I start a project, it has to be pushed to completion no matter what it takes. And so changing my major was not an option. And it was interesting because during my undergrad years, I had a lot of setbacks in terms of like my coursework. I failed Calculus 1, and then Calculus 2, and then Calculus 3 again. And despite of like failing 3 classes, I was able to graduate in 3 years when I was 20. And it was a lot of hard work. Like I worked 3 jobs, and because I was paying for college too, it wasn't possible. Like I would not have changed my majors because that pushes you back and you pay more and all of that. So yeah, I think from a personal perspective, it's really important that if you start a project, you have some sort of conviction in like why you want to do it. And that is really strong. And I would recommend people to keep that and hold on to that, and don't give up no matter how it gets. So I pushed through and I graduated with physics. And then I didn't know what specialty I wanted to go in because it's such a vast field. But that's where Hollywood and Disney comes into play. So one thing I absolutely loved growing up was comic books and the Marvel Universe. My favorite superhero was the Incredible Hulk. And in the Marvel Universe, Hulk is the character Bruce Banner, who is a nuclear physicist. And he does like research on gamma rays and eventually becomes the Hulk. And I was really fascinated by this story of perseverance and just and I thought it really resonated me on multiple fronts. And I eventually decided to learn a little bit about nuclear physics. I minored in nuclear engineering and took a few more courses and eventually pursued that path, and did radiation physics studies and experiments later, and just really fell in love with it. So I think at some point everyone comes across something that resonates with them personally on a deep level. And if you can find that spark and hold on to it, I think that's really important.
I really resonate like with the challenges you face like as just an undergraduate student, and more so like especially like here at Princeton with like the academic rigor of course. So I know you spoke to like failing three math classes. So I was wondering if you could like talk and expand a little bit more on like how you can like keep that motivation going, because like sometimes you may love the subject, but it still can be very discouraging. So what like specific steps did you take, or did you go to anyone or things like that?
Yeah, I am really big on mentorship. And after any setback, I like take a step back and assess the situation, like what went wrong? Why did I not do well? And for me, it was just a lack of understanding on how to study math. And like I come from a background where we are taught to memorize a lot of subjects, or just it's like rote memorization where you just it's just brute forcing. And that's not how you study math. So I took a step back and got tutors and mentors, and I went to all of the office hours that were available. I went to office hours for other courses and other professors that were available, and taught and sought, and I was looking for as much help as I could possibly get in order to succeed. And it was really nice to have those opportunities where there are amazing teachers and teachers, assistants, and students who are willing to help.
I think that's really great. I think what I've noticed, like with myself and friends, I think one of the hardest challenges, like growing up and like entering like, academic and like professional life, is like being able to take that step back and ask for help. So I think that's very encouraging.
And if I may just add to that, my experience, and you know how important writing is at Princeton. And my freshman year, I was contacted by one of the writing assistants in the English department that I needed that. Okay, I'll not be diplomatic, but what it translated to me was, hey, Mays, you can't write. And I said, well, what do you mean I can't write? He said, well, you don't write the way we want you to. And so they said, you have some options. He says, one option is you can come and sit with me for this semester, and I will help you better your writing. And initially I was a bit offended by it, but it taught me something that I continue to practice. And that is that I open up to review, particularly if I'm writing legal briefs or whatever, peer review myself to peer review. I have colleagues that I can say, hey, I just wrote this. I got to file it at 3:00. Can you read it or whatever? And so one has to be in this learning process, accept the input from other people. And yes, I would like to underscore, have a mentor or two that can help you through that. And I find that it has made my writing incredibly better. Now, just one other point. So I went to graduate school, I did the master's degree, I enrolled in the graduate history program. I went to Washington to work in public interest with the intent of going back to graduate school. That never happened. But when I went to law school, freshman 1L, first year, I got that same thing. I got my papers back and they were all marked in red. And I said, how can this be? I make my living writing. And I went to the professor and I said, what's going on here? He says, well, Mays, you need to know how to write like a lawyer. And so I said, okay, I accept that. How do I learn to write like a lawyer? And so you go through that process, and so you need to be open to that throughout your career.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I feel like, college, but also, as you said, like careers are all about like learning curves. And I feel like it's sometimes learning curve after learning curve, but definitely like being open to that, knowing that you're never going to master what you're doing. There's always a new way to look at it. It's like very important for like navigating, life itself, but especially like a career.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And going off of our conversation about like mentorship and like receiving and asking for help, I was wondering if both of you could speak to your experiences as people of color in, law and engineering, very like difficult and complex fields. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome or discrimination? And James, feel free to start off the conversation, and then Soha, you can jump in.
Okay. I've never experienced the imposter syndrome. I had some very good mentors or helpers in terms of my own personal development. And so I never entered the situation thinking that, oh, I shouldn't be here. Now, I did experience or have experienced discrimination where people have said, oh, okay. And I'll just give you two very quick examples. Perhaps the most recent one, I was lead counsel in a federal case dealing with gerrymandering or prison gerrymandering in Maryland. And I walked into the federal court. I always like to be early. I was taught that if you're on time, you're late. So I was there early, and I walked into the courtroom, and I was challenged by the bailiff in the court. Said, "Well, why are you here?" And I'm thinking, well, I'm the lead counsel. I represent one of the parties. But what he was reacting to was the quantum of melanin that I have. And so we had to have a conversation. Now, I've been in other situations like that where people will, I used to get around quite a lot. I was in Mississippi on one occasion with my youngest daughter. We were in a mall in Jackson, and I have this old, I should retire it, but this old Princeton t-shirt that I like to wear. I feel very comfortable in it. And we were walking around the mall, and someone walked up to me and they said, your daughter goes to Princeton? And so I says, no. She went to Spelman, by the way. I couldn't convince her to go to Princeton. But the point was that we can't believe that someone looking like you, and I had the knack to look like a pedestrian, which I don't mind. I try to work at that. But just two examples. And so in my office, what you see in the back of my home office, but I tend to put my degrees and awards and things on the wall. So when somebody comes in, they look and they said, oh, okay, so you're qualified to be here, right? I'll write you a check. And I said, good, because that's what you need to do, so.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the imposter syndrome aspect. Yes, I struggle with it all the time. And I have an analogy, and that analogy is it's like imposter syndrome is like a backpack that you're just emotionally attached to and you can't let go of. You just carry it everywhere with you. And it's like some days it gets heavy and I put it down, and then other days I come back to it, pick it up, put it back on, and walk around. And then gets heavy, then I put it down, but it's always there and I keep coming back to it. And you ask questions like, am I supposed to be here, or do I deserve this? And it's I think analogous to like a mental disorder of some sort, because there's no reason I should be asking these questions, or anyone with imposter syndrome should ask these questions. But I think we should understand that it exists and find ways to deal with it. And a few ways I deal with it is surrounding myself with a close set of friends who can always attest to how awesome I am and hype you up when you're down. And another way is going back to the mentorship thing, having a mentor or two or more in different fields, like for your personal life and one for your professional life and one for like a side hobby or something. And having these mentors and being around them and asking them questions about just doing the best work you can. Because at the end of the day, I think imposter syndrome is there, but I wake up every day knowing that I'm going to try my best and do the best work I can do. And the quality of my work will speak for itself. At the end of the day, people aren't going to ask me whether I have imposter syndrome. They're going to look at my work and they're going to see, what did I produce?
Thank you both for sharing that. kind of like going off the imposter syndrome, like I know a big thing my mom has always told me, as a Black Latina student is, you're gonna feel at times out of place, especially like in white, especially male dominated fields. And even if you feel like that way, you can't let other people see it. So kind of like going off of that, if you like agree or disagree with that sentiment, I was just wondering, so like how do you distinguish yourself like as a leader, as a qualified individual in a field that tends to be male and white dominated?
Yeah. I can say that I am the only senior female engineer that sits on my floor near my area. And so this is something that I think about a lot. Like every time I walk into the office, there's a whiff of men deodorant and just like men smells, and you think like, oh geez, this again. And the biggest thing I think I took away from being a female leader is to come at all conversations with unwavering empathy and kindness, because that's something I saw lacking in a lot of other leaders, and especially like other white male leaders in my community. A lot of times, men traditionally have been taught to suppress their emotions or not seen as soft. And I think that is an empowering tool. I think that should not be the case. And as a minority, as a woman, coming to the floor with a table of all men, I come with kindness and empathy first and make sure I portray those skills. Yeah.
I think it's important, and I like your response because when I was chair of an academic department at this school in North Carolina, there was no motto for the department. A lot of schools, departments have. So I thought about it, and I said, the way we approach this is that we have to talk about values. And there were 3 values that were important to me. One was legacy, understanding who you are. And we are all multidimensional. That's the thing. The second was integrity. And the third was competence. And I presented this both to the faculty, the staff, and the students, and emphasized that these are the values that we need to aspire. And I would spend time, especially for the freshman classes coming in, explaining how to think about these values. And I use them in my life because I'm always reminded about the fact that when I was born, segregation in this country was legal. And I grew up, I was well into my teens before we had civil rights legislation. And so, and then I also have these, because we are all multidimensional, I have these other legacies as well. And so there are times where you have to make departures from some of these legacies because they're like backpacks that you're carrying around. And so you have to liberate yourself so that you could begin to appreciate where other people are at. And integrity is so important because at the bottom line, whatever your pronoun is, or however you identify yourself, you need to be a person of integrity. That's essential. This world doesn't work very well without integrity. And I've been in situations both with professionals, fellow colleagues, and with personal friends where there was a breakdown in integrity, and I had a very difficult time dealing with it. And finally, you always need to, as they like to say, do your job the best. And you owe that. You owe it to the people you work with. You owe it to the institution. So I was told coming up that the reason I got so much help from people in the community because they expected things from me. And not half-stepping, but going above and beyond. That's how I approach things. And so I would agree that we need to, as we enter these different spaces, enter them, with empathy. My oldest son is an engineer. He's a lead engineer at Microsoft, and he is most often, like you, the odd one out, you know. And so we talk about these things, and I tell him, I said, do not let that deter you. Be the person you need to be, because at the end of the day, the people who love you expect you to be that. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree. And if I can add one more thing, sometimes it also feels like if you're the only person of color or the only minority that looks like you in your space, sometimes you have this sense of responsibility to do better work than everybody else because you are a spokesperson for your community. And yeah, and that's something I think we all live with. I think a lot of times we work harder than others and we try to produce better results than others because we want to make sure that we're being a good role model and being a good spokesperson for everyone else.
Thank you very much for sharing both of your personal experiences with that topic. It's very inspiring to hear about how you've dealt with it and how that's shaped your journeys going forward. So we've spoken a bit about community and mentorship. So sort of adjacent to that topic, we were wondering if James, you could start off on speaking about the topic of networking, namely, how do you network and why is it important?
I had a friend when I was doing my contract work with the State Department. She was the daughter of a president of a university, rather important university in the South, and she was African American, and came, you know, she would be described as a Black American princess because she had everything, and we would talk back and forth about that because I always see myself as the pedestrian, and she reminded me. She says, "No, you're not the salt of the earth, James. What I know about you and how you grew up, you had some privilege going on there too, and so I've had to accept that." But I say that to say because I would often talk to her about why she's a graduate of the Wharton School. She came out of Wharton in '67, I believe, did very well for herself. And she said, well, why didn't you just do the normal thing? Because we had some mutual friends that said, did Princeton, Yale Law School, then on to, so stay within that Northeastern elite corridor, you know, career track. And she said, well, why did you go to Ohio State? I actually had, I won't mention his name, but because he's a Princeton alum and federal judge, now retired. But he asked me the same thing, Princeton, Harvard Law. And he said, why would you go to University of Baltimore Law School? And my explanation was very simple. I wanted to expand my network. So I left Princeton. I proved to myself that I could compete in an elite environment. I went to Ohio State, the Midwest, someplace. I have family in the Midwest, but never really lived there, and met an entirely different set of people who live with different assumptions. Privilege means something different to them than it does to, you know, if you live in that, you know, Philadelphia to Boston corridor. And then I went to University of Baltimore, a working class law school where people were trying to, you know, advance socially and economically. And I met another group of people. And so that was building a network. And what it did for me was to expand my perspectives. It enriched my life. And it also connected me with different, well, at least from the legal profession, different groups of people who some will become clients or refer me to clients or help me develop new practice areas. So it was very enriching. So networking is important and makes you a better professional, makes you a better person, keeps you grounded and keeps you connected to, when we talk about we're all United States citizens, but if you live around, the little mud hole in front of your house and never go anywhere or willing to meet people on the other side of the mountain or down in the valley, you don't really experience the richness of what this country has to offer. So I think networking is incredibly important.
Yeah, I totally agree with James there. And there are different modalities of networking. And one modality that James mentioned is, going from one part of the country to another and, switching schools. And that's something I did too, because I did my bachelor's in Texas. And then my first job was in California in the nuclear field. And then I pursued a master's in Princeton on the East Coast. And now I'm in Florida. So kind of have spanned the whole United States in terms of like where I have my networks. But not a lot of people are, have the flexibility or the means to, just move from one place to another. And in that case, LinkedIn or virtual means come in really handy. I had a goal when I graduated from Princeton. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And I made it a personal goal to do informational interviews with 100 different people, ranging from medical doctors to hedge fund managers to, finance bros to all the way like to senior engineers at the industry level. And I've met teachers along the way. And I had a diary with all of these informational interviews that I've done. And over the span of the year, I did this in 2020. I learned so much about people and what motivates people to pursue the careers they're in, what they like about that career, what they don't, and how they envision changing or impacting the world through their lens. And at the end of the day, it's just really important to seek out mentorship and ask for informational interviews, go places, meet people, and come at it with an eager mind to learn new things.
That's super interesting to hear about both of your approaches to networking and different modalities. As for our last question, I was wondering, Mr. Mays, feel free to kick it off. What was your biggest piece of advice for students entering the workforce?
Oh, okay. I like that question because my work life has included what people would consider very divergent things, but they all fit together to me. And so the first thing I would say, do what you love. And remember not to, don't live to work, but work to live. And save time in what you do. And I tend to be a workaholic. So I'm always mindful, someone will come knock on the door. Now it's the grandkids and said, what's up, Grandpa? I mean, come spend time with us. It's not all in the book or on the computer screen. And so make time to love, make time to be charitable, make time to serve your community. These are all very important things. And then I'm going to go back to something that Soha said, right? Be genuine in your personality, who you are. And in that way, be empathetic. Understand where people are at, because sooner or later, we all experience the same things. Maybe not exactly the same way, but we all experience the loss of a loved one. We all experience defeat or failure. I've lost a bunch of cases in where I thought I should have won hands down. And, you walk out and you have to look at your client and say, hey, we lost. I did the best I could. And so understanding that you'll be on both sides of sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes you solve a problem, but then there's some intractable problems, things that no matter how hard you work, you may not get the result that you want. So I would say as you launch into your career, what did the Buddha say? Be open to outcome. As you proceed through life is going to present you with some interesting choices. Be brave enough to go down, what is that poem? Two roads diverge. There's Frost, I believe, right? Look at both those roads. Again, echoing something that Soha said, look at both of the roads. Talk to people that kind of walk down that road and say, hey, what did you find down there? And don't be judgmental about what you might find, because it may be the best thing for you. So that's my little response to that.
Yeah, I have 2 points that I think are really important in terms of professional development. The first is, if you're not learning, you're not growing. And it's just as simple as that. And the second one is more elaborate. And I think going back to the idea of mentorship, it's really, really important that your supervisor or your boss or your advisor, whoever is above you in charge of your professional development, has to be your biggest spokesperson. Because if they are not, it becomes very hard to progress in your career. I think they have to be a good ally, and they have to, and your boss, I'm going to call it a boss, have to really look out for you as a person and make sure you're developing and on the right career trajectory to success.
Agreed.
Thank you guys so much for sharing that. I honestly, both of what you said, I couldn't put that. I mean, obviously I haven't been through my career journey yet, but I think those are very, very important takeaways that I know along with my fellow moderators and anyone who watches this video should definitely take with them as guiding lights. But James, so thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We, from the bottom of our hearts, we genuinely appreciate everything you've shared with us and all your experiences and insights you've provided. And we're really excited to send this out to the larger community so they can get the same joy and experience from this as we did. And we know your stories will serve nothing short of motivation for anyone who watches. So thank you guys again so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I hope to see you all at reunions.
Okay.
Yes, have a lot of fun. Yep. Safe
All
trip
right.
to Sound of Richardson as well.
Have a good day.